this is something that happened last week, so it's kind of an apology. Last week, just like this week, just like every week, I assume every week for the next 2-3 weeks, 99% Corona news. And I don't want to do Corona news. I don't want to deliver Corona news to the world. It's just a fact of living in Japan right now. Japan is not taking care of Corona. There's one here. Corona is just the news of the day. You're not getting away from Corona. Last week I said, what I'll do is I'll put the other stories up front and then do Corona news. So if you don't want to hear the Corona news, you can listen to the 2-3 other stories. Then stop. But because I was talking about Corona, I started doing the first story about Corona because it was just in my head. Then did the whole episode about Corona and had the random stories at the end. So if you were hoping I was actually going to follow through on the thing I said I was going to follow through on, I vaguely apologize for that because it was unintentional. So if we're going to take intent as part of the punishment or the level of apology required, then the level of apology is quite low. Because I did not intend to do the thing I did. I just happened to accidentally do the opposite of what I said I was going to do. So that's actually sort of an apology from me to you. I'm not going to make the same mistake. This week again is all Corona stuff, and it's actually all Corona plus Olympics. I have been reading, so we're going to get straight into the Corona news. There's no getting away from it, so we're just going to do it. Here's the thing. They're opening mass vaccination centers. I think I mentioned that last time. They're going to open one in Tokyo, one in Osaka. And those are okay. They want to do 1 million vaccinations a day, as we've talked about before. If you do the math, that's actually not that many. There was a story that came out a couple days ago, said China's vaccinating 14 million people a day. Now, I am not anti-China, but I am suspicious of Chinese state media. And I'm a little suspicious of China in general because of the political system allows them to get away with certain liberties that other countries might not be able to get away with. They said they were vaccinating 14 million people a day. I don't know if that's 100% true. And they didn't really say what they were vaccinating them with. If these were the Chinese vaccination. I remember it was months ago, the state leaders came out and got vaccinated so that everyone would know it was safe. But there's actually no way to know what they were vaccinated with. They may have just stuck them with saline solution. Who knows? I do have suspicion about state-run media. Let's put it that way. Japan's current plan is the SDF, the Self-Defense Force, so basically the Japanese version of the military. But it's not a military because of the Constitution. We're not going to get into all that. That would be a different day. They're going to be running the mass vaccination venues, which is a really good idea. Because now you have an organization that is organized. They have the infrastructure. They have people who are dedicated and will do as they're told. And they will maintain order because they have a certain gravitas that comes with them being in military uniforms. The registration and the administration of these 2 vaccination centers are going to be run by travel agencies. So the one in Tokyo is going to be run by Nippon Travel Agency. And they're going to do all the clerical work. And the one in Osaka is going to be Tobu Top Tours. So you have these 2 companies that, because of coronavirus, basically have no work to do. And they have these workers who, maybe you're not getting paid. Maybe they're being told to stay home. They're probably getting their government money. So when your company basically can't function during a pandemic like this, the government's actually paying X amount of yen to your staff for you. That's taxpayer money. In this case, it's let's use those people, which is really good. I think this is a really cool idea. You're taking companies and you're giving them full-time work so they have staff get paid. A temp agency, which I didn't realize this is how this works, called Career Company, is going to dispatch 200 nurses to the mass vaccination sites. So you remember Suga, it was last week or the week before, said he wanted 500 volunteer nurses for the Olympics. And then the doctors union or the nurses union was nuh-uh. That clearly is not the way they went with volunteers and stuff for this. You got to pay people to work. And especially now, these people who are overworked, they need to have something come back to them for this to be successful. 200 nurses are going to be dispatched by a temp agency. So you have the staff, you have the clerical works taken care of, the organizations taken care of by the SDF, you have the travel agency doing the clerical work, you have the temp agency administering the doses. This is a really good plan. And that's kind of what bugs me about it, because we are now in the third state of emergency and the fourth lockdown. I've said this every week for the last couple of weeks. Why wasn't this plan put into place after the first state of emergency? I know they didn't have the vaccines, so that is one reason for not the vaccinations. But when it got to the point where, like, we got to organize people, we got to get stuff under control, we have to have a plan in place, we have to be successful. This is successful. This is a good plan. They have the right people doing the right jobs. They have people who need work working. They're paying the medical workers to do the job. Everything's getting taken care of. Who came up with this plan? Why was not this plan done 6 months ago, 8 months ago, when we needed it in place? Maybe the biggest disappointment is we don't have credit to the person who came up with this plan, because that is the one thing I would like to know about. Who came up with this plan? Because it's a good plan. A Japanese drug company, this is related, kind of. A Japanese drug company is planning to make a vaccine within the next year. The company hopes to contribute to the early containment of the corona pandemic through concentrated investment of management resources. So one phrase in that sentence kind of set me off a little bit, and I think it was the early containment, because it's been a year. And I mean, cosmologically, 1 year, yes, is not very much. In the grand scheme of the entire universe and space-time, yeah, 1 year is just a blip. But when it comes to the pandemic that human beings who live a human being sort of time frame in existence, that's not exactly early. So I was wondering what they were thinking about. There's a whole separate set of issues with vaccinations and stuff in Japan, and why they didn't develop their own. That actually was a big question for a lot of people. Why hasn't Japan developed their own vaccine already? And they just don't put a lot of effort into it. It's not that Japanese people are anti-vaccination. They're not anti-vaxxers in general. But there is a lot of suspicion. It's because experiments were done in the past. So there's a lot of people who don't want to touch any vaccines. They don't want to have anything to do with vaccines until they've been proven. And some of the stories we've done in the past have shown that maybe the Japanese population is almost more sensitive to the effects of vaccines. There was one story we did a few weeks ago, and it was compared to England, it was like 12 or 14 times more cases of anaphylaxis. Now, we're still talking about like 12 cases in a million. So again, in the grand scheme of things, not that many, but it shows that there's a sensitivity there. There's a different set of genes at work. It is something to be considered. So one of the biggest problems this company had in trying to come up with its own vaccine was that it wasn't able to get people to volunteer to test on. So if you're in America, if you're in the UK and say we have a vaccine, it could work, we're going to try it out. Do you want to try it out? They can get people. In Japan, that's actually less likely. There are a whole other set of problems to be dealt with. But at the same time, I don't think you should come out in the news with a statement saying you want to have early containment when you're already in your fourth state of emergency after 1 year of having the disease run rampant in your country. If I can be honest, the state of emergency in Japan seems to mean almost nothing, at least where I live. So Aichi, the place where I work, went into the state of emergency, was it the 14th? So it was very recently. I'd actually have to check my calendar. It doesn't matter. I think the reason I don't remember the day is because I haven't seen any difference. The amount of people on the trains is the same. The amount of people going out is the same. Pubs and stuff, they are supposed to be closing earlier, but I actually, because I'm cautious, I'm gone by that time. So I don't actually know if there's still people going out. I talk to other people. You might find that weird, but I do talk to other people, and those other people, they go out. And so that is already a concern. That's one of the problems that I have. It seems like when you hit your fourth state of emergency, the population at large just doesn't consider it to be a significant thing anymore. They just start live their lives as normal. I don't know if it's the same in like, because Osaka and Tokyo, they're much bigger cities with bigger populations and it's more densely populated, and they are having more cases. So maybe it's being taken more seriously there, but I'd actually have to talk to someone who lives there. I wouldn't want, again, a political version. I'd like someone who actually goes to work every day to tell me what it's like in Osaka every day, what it's like in Tokyo every day, and see if it's the same or different. Because I bet most people just have given up. They just don't care. New arrivals in Japan. They are supposed to remain quarantined for 14 days. And they are supposed to have a thing called the OEL tracker app on their phone. And they're supposed to keep track of your movements, where you are. So they can actually check if you're quarantined. They will do daily checks via the phone. So they're going to call you every day and they're going to say, do you have any symptoms or whatnot? And then to prove that you haven't broken quarantine, they'll call you on like Skype or something, a video service, and like be like, turn your phone around so we can look at your surroundings. So if I was in this room, they'd be like, look that I'm still in my room. They want to be able to see it. And so that's one of the ways they're checking people aren't breaking quarantine. But what they found so far is that 300 people a day on average are breaking quarantine or failing to report their location. The punishment for Japanese people, if you break quarantine and put X unknown number of people at risk, is nothing. I guess it is something. You're going to be shamed publicly. They're going to put they're going to put your name out there. They're going to say, like, Peter broke quarantine. My problem with that punishment primarily is that the kind of person who's going to break quarantine isn't really going to be particularly concerned about public shaming, is my belief. I don't know if that's true, but it's honestly, I think if you're going to break quarantine, you probably don't have that much shame anyway. So public shaming doesn't work. Public shaming only works on people who feel shame. That is more people in Japan on average, but the people who do these things, break laws, commit crimes, what have you, they have less shame to feel publicly. So publicly shaming them is less effective. It is way more serious if you're a foreign person. So let's say I got sick and I was supposed to be quarantined and I broke quarantine. I could actually have my visa revoked. So I have a permanent visa, but a permanent visa only means that it does not expire. That does not mean it cannot be taken away. So if I break the laws and whatnot, I could actually have my visa revoked. That would mean I would have to go back to Canada. I'd lose my job and whatnot. Probably more importantly, they wouldn't let me back in the country. Getting your visa revoked is bad. You get kicked out. You don't get to come back. The problem with punishing people, and this was a big part of this article, the problem with punishing people for breaking quarantine is that freedom of movement is actually written into the Japanese constitution. So how do you punish something that is a basic civil right that is actually written into law in the constitution of your country? So that's tough. And I get that's difficult. And this takes us back to the episode where I said accidentally pro-dictatorship, because in these trying times, which is a phrase I never want to use seriously, every podcast for about 6 weeks was in these trying times, and then trying to be funny. How do you give these powers, and then when you give these powers to actually punish people, do you take them away again later? Do they have like an expiry date or something like that? I don't have an answer for that. I really don't. I wish I did. I know something needs to be done because enforcing this is important. I read a news article and it was about the response in Taiwan, and it was amazing. I forget who it was. I'm not going to remember in the moment. Anyways, they had this amazing response, and the idea was that if you stay in quarantine, you get like, let's say $30-40 a day. But if you break quarantine, you had to pay $30,000 or $40,000. So there was a small benefit for staying in quarantine, and there was a massive punishment if you broke quarantine. And they just had it hooked up to your cell phone, so you had to have this thing on your cell phone. If you walked 500 meters or feet, I forget what the measurement was, but if you walk X amount of feet away from your house or where you're supposed to be quarantined, it just sends a message to the police, and that's it. You're done, and you have to pay $30,000, whatever. And if you're found outside without your phone on you, same thing, you get punished. So a monetary punishment I actually think would be appropriate. And I think that might actually be the more effective one. And if you're very honest and clear about it, it's very difficult for people to argue. There has been an ad campaign that came out. It's actually gotten a lot of news because private companies don't generally criticize the government in Japan. They have this old World War II photo, and it was kids training with bamboo sticks. So like doing like kendo practice, basically. It's an old black and white photo, but they actually put it on in sort of a blue color. And they're attacking, it looks like they're attacking, they've superimposed a giant like corona bacteria or virus molecule. My science, someone's going to send me a message about how bad my science is, which is fine. It's also correct. I do not know my terms properly unless I read them beforehand, which I did not do clearly. They're attacking a giant corona bubble. The statement was, no vaccine, no medication. Are we supposed to fight with bamboo spears? Politics are going to kill us. We have been tricked. What was the past year for? Which is pretty accurate. The only thing that's not accurate is the no medication. There is medication. It's just not a vaccine. There's a couple of rheumatism medications because I actually had to take them at one time, so I kind of know what they are. They were approved for corona. It's actually just an anti-inflammatory, and that actually will help you breathe better if your lungs or throat or whatever is inflamed. And it's supposed to help a lot. It can actually get you off a ventilator. So there is medications. There's lots of medications. Japan's flush with medications. It's the vaccine we don't have. So the first part is correct. But I agree to a degree with what they're saying is the politics is actually the problem. The guy who came up with the previous story, let's do our super centers with the SDF and the nurses and stuff, I mean, get that guy on the job. He's got it right. Oh, someone who didn't have a good plan. Here you go. This is the opposite of the person who made the plan before. They want to set up vaccines for people who are over 65. That's the group who could get vaccinated first. So we had healthcare workers, people with severe conditions, and then basically older people. So the people who are plus 65, they're basically getting vaccinated now. You could do it. There were 3 ways you could register for your vaccination. I think it was Ibaraki. I didn't write down the city. Usually I don't talk about the cities specifically too much. Anyways, there's a town, and you could set it up by phone, via the internet, or in person. And this was for everyone over 65 plus. Now, if you know anyone over 65, you are already starting to see the problem with the options of how you could actually register for a vaccination. And that is because they're not going to use the internet. So that one, easily the most convenient for the person organizing everything, that's the one they're not going to use. They are going to call, but more than anything else, they're going to show up in person. The line started at 4 a.m., which was, their mid-afternoon meal as far as they're concerned, considering how early they get up. Getting up at 4 a.m. to go wait in line does not seem like an unusual thing in Japan for nerds. But old people who have, quite frankly, very little to do, yeah, they're going to get up as early as they want, show up, and get in line, so they're going to be first in line. They started giving out tickets. So the idea was we give out tickets so you don't have to stay here. You know when you're going to be able to come in and actually get to register and stuff. This isn't for the vaccine. This is to register to get the vaccine. Before they even got like halfway through the crowd, tickets ran out. And there were people still were trying to register via the phone and stuff. So the people who are there are just smacked. They're slammed. They're busy. Some people showed up, and of course they couldn't get a ticket to get registered to get the vaccine. Then they were like, okay, this didn't work. We're going to try again. People started lining up the day before. So they were going to stay all night so they could be first in line to get their ticket, to get registered, to get the vaccine. This was weirdly hopeful because it shows that people actually want to get vaccinated. Whereas when, I think this was when we got to the first state of emergency, I actually talked to a bunch of old people. They were in a class. They're old people. I'm the youngest. I'm like 50. And I was the youngest person in the room. Everyone else was like 60, 65, 70 years old. 0%, this was only a survey of 8 people, but 0 of them said they were going to get vaccinated because they were worried about what I said earlier, like the concerns about whether it's safe or not. So once basically everyone else has gotten vaccinated, they actually were saying 10 years down the line, we don't know what the effects are going to be, which is true. But if you're 70, 10 years down the line, it's really going to matter? Because I was actually thinking that about myself. I'm old enough where 10 years down the line, if I start to have negative effects, yeah, that's bad. I didn't die of corona now, so I got actually 10 extra years. And then there's some sort of side effect or something. Absolutely, it is possible. But I was like, we're all at the age where it might be worth taking that chance. Probably glad I didn't say that to them because I'm sure there would have been a bit of blowback. I probably would have gotten in trouble. So anyways, they tried again. It was way worse. People started waiting the day before. It was a massive crowd. What's one thing you don't want in a pandemic? A large crowd of 65-year-plus people in a close proximity spreading their germs with each other. That is just not what you want. And that is, of course, exactly what happened. So the mayor shows up. He's like, hey, everybody, oops, sorry. Didn't fix anything, just said apologize. But I mean, imagine having so many people show up to like a public facility and the mayor, it's so bad the mayor shows up to say sorry. Like that's actually what happened here. Then they're just like, you know what? Fuck it. And they shut the whole thing down. They shut down the reception desk. There is not much of a resolution. Some people are calling for the mayor to resign, even though I don't know if this was his plan or not. So I don't know if he's 100% responsible. I do know there is someone out there who can't make a good plan. We should get that guy on the job. I don't know who that guy is. He's like the best planner in Japan as far as I'm concerned. I want him doing everything. Please get me his name. Business executives have started to complain that the vaccine rollout is too slow. And I actually thought this is probably the most optimistic thing that's going to happen because when businesses complain, things happen. So people have been complaining the whole time. Things aren't good. They're not going fast enough. We're not doing a good job. And the government's like, yeah, we're doing our best. Everything's okay. Businesses start to complain. And what they're saying, of course, this is to me almost an irony. They're not saying this is bad for people. This is bad for our workers. This is bad for, human existence. What they're saying is growth is at risk. If the pandemic essentially goes on too much longer, growth economically for Japan is at risk, and that is unacceptable. The people dying, people getting sick, that's okay. But growth is at risk. And that's not okay. That's not enough. Mitsubishi has made a statement. Toyota, one of the major sponsors of the Olympics, is actually sent out statements, or people who represent them have said they're conflicted about the Olympics because they're like, we want a successful Olympics because we put so much money into it. But we don't want a whole bunch of people to die, and then we certainly don't want a whole bunch of people to die and then them connected to the name Toyota. So they're torn about it. So they're actually on the fence as to whether or not they should have the Olympics. Being a major sponsor, I actually think they have a pretty big voice in whether or not it goes ahead or not. Shiseido is a makeup company. You might be like, well, who cares what a makeup company thinks? But they have it's a massive company in Japan. Their statement was tourists won't return. You might be like, well, those don't seem connected. A huge amount of tourists from China come to Japan just to buy makeup because of the reputation. So that's something to keep. So they're like saying like our industry, tourism, which is massive in Japan, they're not going to come back if we don't fix this soon because it's going to be damaging Japan's reputation. It's not going to be seen as a safe place because one of the big selling points of Japan to tourists is that Japan is an incredibly safe country. If Japan is now seen as a country full of diseased people, it's an island, so it's a petri dish, that can't take care of themselves, that's a significant issue, and it's going to stop people coming to Japan because they'll be like, oh, don't go there, you'll get sick. Rakuten, which is sort of Japanese Amazon, this is a weird statement. Things need to bounce back, or things will get difficult. So that's to me a very Japanese statement because it's heavy with something, but it's very unclear what. So yeah, things need to bounce back. We need to get our economy back on track, but things will get difficult. I think they might already be difficult. Rakuten, maybe you haven't noticed. 2 days ago, there was a poll done, and it was 60% people say we should either postpone or cancel the Olympics. And then yesterday, another poll was done, and it was 80% oppose hosting the Olympics. which is only 10 weeks away now. 43% of the people said they want to cancel it, and 40% said they want to postpone it. So it's now an incredible minority of people. Last week, when I actually released Ninja News Japan, I was saying, like, I'm in the same group. I personally do not value the Olympics that much. So I don't know if it's always worth the country taking on the burden of the Olympics. I don't know if it's something they should actually go for. Japan has hosted the Olympics 3 times in the past. This will be the 4th time. Now they're kind of committed. They want it to go well. And this is sort of Toyota's issue. Like, we've put so much into it already. It just makes us look bad if we give up. But I think if you give up for safety of human life, people might understand in the long run. You can actually spin that to make yourself look good. If you have the Olympics and a whole bunch of people get sick and a whole bunch of people die, that's harder to spin. A lot of people are now at the point where they're like, maybe the Olympics is not a great idea. Since we're talking about polls, this was actually interesting. A survey was done, 1,000 people, so the math works out really nice. A survey was done to find out what anime fans want a live action movie version of. So you have a lot of anime in the world. You want a live action movie. Everyone does, of course, so much. What would be the best one? 6% said, 60 votes said Demon Slayer. They want a live action Demon Slayer movie. It's beat Mortal Kombat. What was it? A couple weeks ago. That was a news story. It was the #1 movie in America for the opening weekend. 45.6%, so 456 votes, voted nothing. Anime is fine the way it is. There's no need to make a live action version of it. I don't really want to see that. Who needs it? Which I thought actually was pretty reasonable. I've actually wondered why a lot of science fiction doesn't go animated, because it can be done just as well. I mean, you got to choose your style and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I actually think it would be a lot easier to make an animated science fiction movie or superhero movie, and again, with a massive budget, than to use live action actors and green screen and CGI and stuff. This was a survey done of 1,000 people from their teens to their 60s. So it's actually a pretty broad swatch age-wise, demographic-wise. But 1,000 people, for a survey, it's not that many. But when you get close to half saying the same thing of a broad demographic, yep, probably true. And honestly, I feel the same way. If you have a really good anime, you forget that it's anime. You don't need a live action version. That's not usually better. In fact, most of them are worse. The Attack on Titan movies were garbage. Is it a crime? He's getting arrested, so it's a crime. I guess it says what he gets arrested for, which is something that a lot of people on Ninja News Japan get arrested for. Not on Ninja News Japan, but the people we talk about. In a 12-month period, a man placed 3,875 calls to police to talk. There was no emergency. He just wanted to talk to them. I assume to talk actually means to complain, which could change the feeling of what that statement actually means. So that's 1 year. I'm going to do the math. Let me just get a calculator up. So 365 days. Oh, no, I got to do it the other way. So 3,875 calls divided by 365 days means he is doing 10 calls a day. Now that doesn't sound like that much. I'm assuming he took days off. I should have done the math like a working day, like he works 5 days a week and makes calls. 10 calls a day is already too many. Like means a lot of your calls. And how long is he keeping them on the phone for? So actually, if he calls once every hour, that's 10 hours a day if he's talking for an hour straight. In one day, he called 254 times. So that shows that he's not calling, doing an average. He's not doing 10 calls a day every day. He's not calling for a week and then doing a bunch of calls and then taking a couple of weeks off and then doing a bunch of calls. But one day, 254 times. Now I kind of want to do like a 12-hour day and work out how many calls he did per minute or per hour. But I'm sure you don't want to watch me sit here and do math. Maybe you do. I don't know what's popular on Twitch. I don't know what's popular on the internet. I don't really know what's popular. ASMR is a thing I don't understand. It's bigger than my channels. So maybe I should just sit here and do really basic math about things, and people really glom it. Maybe people will learn some math. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not particularly good at math, but I know my basic functions. I really like cross multiplication to find out the average or the number when you're talking about like percentages. Cross multiplication is awesome. So when you want to find like something out of 100 and then what that is out of like 385,000, and then you do cross multiplication times X, love that. I love that I learned it and it stuck. So if my education is not particularly valuable overall, one math class at one point had an impact. I did not make the calls to interfere with the work of the police officers. I wanted the police to talk to me. Which I think, again, if you look at both sentences and then reflect one on the other, you're realizing the problem. And the problem is, I want the police to talk to me. He's interfering with them if they actually have work to do. So he doesn't understand what interfere with police work means, unless he thinks that police work is them talking to him, which in this case is very, very possible. When he was arrested and he said, there is no decent police officer responding to 110. What a waste. 110 is like 911. It's not quite. It's for serious things. Okay. I learned this. I learned there's a number for not serious things. So if you call 110, it's for urgent matters, accidents, and incidents. That's how they said it in the article. 9110 is for non-urgent matters. So I actually sat down and be like, well, what do you call that for? Like, I guess, yeah, if just like there's noise complaints and stuff, like it's not like I need a cop to roll out right away. I guess actually a noise complaint you would, because otherwise the noise would just keep going. I really want to know what people call 9110 for. I don't want to call it and ask. I guess that's a non-urgent matter. What is this line for that you guys have set up? Yes. A classic Ninja News Japan story of a man exposing himself in public. This is what people come here for. This is why I don't put this up at the front. So last week when I said I'll put the non-Corona news at the front and then everyone will sign off, because they would. Because they come here for the dirty stuff. I got to keep the dirty stuff near the end. I watch a lot of clip videos on YouTube. And I noticed that the thumbnail is always like a relatively attractive woman. Sex sells. That's something the person who made that website or whatever has figured out. But the clip of the girl from the thumbnail is always in the last like 10 seconds. So if you want to, I actually want the clips. I don't actually care about, the sexy girls are great. I'm not going to complain about them. But if you want to watch just the sexy girl, you could actually skip the whole video and just get to the last like 30 seconds. And she's in there somewhere. That's a weirdly pervy tip. If you do that, you really need to take a step back and look at your life, because there would actually be easier ways to just find pictures or videos of sexy ladies. There's a lot of porn on the internet. A man was on the train, and this might be saying a lot about me. I wanted to know what their positioning was. Was she sitting down and he was standing up? Was she sitting down and he was sitting across from her? There was a lot of stuff I wanted to know. It seems like just from the event itself, he was standing. Yeah. Because I all these dirty stories, I want details so that I can figure out what they were doing, so that I can try to get into motivations and sort of the process and stuff. He exposed his lower body, in quotes, to the woman for 10 minutes. He said the article said he touched himself, and the woman got off the train and called the staff. That's really the whole story. It was the thing that got my attention was 10 minutes. And it doesn't mention whether or not there were other people on the train car. Because if there were, you think after a 10-minute period, someone would have stepped in or said something. Japan is very much a country where something happens. People pretend that they pretend it isn't happening. But 10 minutes is a bit much. Like, if he flashed her, everyone around could pretend they didn't see that happen. But when you get past the 1 minute mark, it's hard to deny what just happened. When he was arrested, security footage was very easy to figure out who was who. When he was arrested, he said, "I do not clearly remember." And I don't know if that's the fog of war that has made his memory so foggy, or that he might be lying, and he does remember because it was 10 minutes of his pants down on a train. I was about to give more criminal advice. And it was actually like, the first bit of advice would be not 10 minutes, but even 10 seconds. Don't do that. This is not worth getting arrested for. Having a lady see your junk is just not worth it. That's Ninja News Japan's moral of the day. A lady seeing your junk isn't worth getting arrested over. Have a good week.
You can tweet questions or comments at Ninja News Japan or join the Facebook group. On Facebook, search for Ninja News Japan. Sexy out, homies.
I can't start the podcast until post burp. I suppose most people, when I play games with my friends, I extend the burp. The world record for burping, I believe, is more than 1 minute. I think I can do it. I think this is maybe one of the only things. There's one thing I was number one in the world of, and that was a game called Poop Ride. It was Poopride. So I didn't know if that was poo, pride, or poop ride. But I played it the first week it was released because I was working for a website. And because I played in the first week, I got real high in the rankings. I ended up being number one in the world in Poop Ride the game. I believe that's the only thing. The longest burp in the world, I do believe, if I trained properly, I would have a shot. I think I could be the world champion for longest burp in the world. Not loudest, not strongest, not even most sonorous, just longest burp in the world.